Hey, welcome back. Today, let's talk about a very interesting concept related to listening that I got from Celeste Headley's book called We Need to Talk. This is the idea of listening cues. This is another model for understanding how we listen in conversation and how to be a more gracious and generous conversational partner when listening to others. In her book, Headley talks about two types of listening cues. One of them is external. These are the types of cues that you will often hear discussed in terms of what you can physically do or see to try and demonstrate to another person that you are listening. For example, make consistent eye contact. If you don't make eye contact, it means that you're showing that you're not paying attention. Use lots of back channeling, such as nod your head, or give back channel expressions like, uh huh, oh, really? Yeah, oh, okay. So these kinds of external cues are very interesting, but Headley and myself would ask you to disregard them because they are crap and they suck. It's terrible advice. Now, I would tell you why, but I think that Headley can tell you better herself why these external listening cues are terrible advice when trying to be a better listener.
Many of you have already heard a lot of advice on this. Things like look the person in the eye, think of interesting topics to discuss in advance, nod and smile to show that you're paying attention, repeat back what you just heard or summarize it. So I want you to forget all of that. It is crap. There is no reason to learn how to show you're paying attention if you are, in fact, paying attention.
Yes. If you can actually engage and pay attention in a conversation, there is no need to put conscious effort into things like nodding your head or smiling or back channeling. Instead, Headley talks about the idea of internal listening cues. These are kind of mental prompts or exercises that can help us try to stay focused and engage when listening to someone else speak to us. These often come in the form of questions. For example, what is being said? Now, this is a very obvious statement, but it's a little bit easier said than done. A lot of research shows that people can speak at a rate of about 125 words per minute, but we can listen at a rate of about 400 words per minute. And we can think at a rate of about 800 words per minute. So that means that as we're trying to tune into what someone is telling us, we have a lot of mental bandwidth that is just going unused, and it's so easy for us to fall into the trap of thinking of a witty reply or generating a story of our own to contribute. And Headley warns us not to do that. We should really put in the extra effort to be present and to truly listen to what the other person is telling us when we are in a conversation. However, that doesn't mean that there's not productive questions that can allow us to engage with the other person outside of just the meaning of the words that are being said. For example, what is the underlying emotion? Sometimes there's a disconnect between what a person is saying, the dictionary meaning of their words, and the emotion through which they are expressing it. For example, today is a great day, isn't it? Now, clearly you have some questions about that statement, and it's not because of the meaning of the words that I said. So question yourself, what is the underlying emotion when you're speaking to somebody? Is there a disconnect between their emotional expression and the meaning of their message? Another great one is, what questions do I have? You know, I always ask you this question, what questions do you have? And the reason is because I totally know that something that sounds clear in my own head is not always clear to you. Questions is about trying to fill in the gaps. So you can truly show that you're listening to somebody by trying to ask a question to fill in the gaps. Like, Whoa, back up. How did you get to that point? Maybe you have to fill in some backstory, or maybe you really need to fill in a piece of information to better understand what somebody is saying. If so, trying to think about questions that relate to what the conversational partner is telling you can be very helpful to show that you are a engaged listener. And both of these cues lend themselves to a very high level advanced listening cue, which is what has not been said. When you can really intuit the context in which somebody is speaking, then you notice not only the meaning of the words that are being said, but the void of what goes unexpressed. For example, I once had a conversation with a former coworker, and he was talking about some of the behavior that his father had exhibited during his childhood, and maybe it was somewhat obvious to him, but more obvious to me. And so as I listened, I pointed out, your dad seems like kind of an anxious guy. And it was crazy to see his eyes light up. He really felt like he was being heard. He really felt like I was listening because I was able to point out something that was not being said, but that was kind of inherently true, something that he could easily latch onto, and something that would show, wow, Ian was really listening to what I had to say. As you listen, as you try to use that extra cognitive bandwidth beyond just the words being spoken, is what patterns do you notice in a person's speech? And what intuitions or predictions can you make and perhaps test them by asking another question in order to try and figure out what the underlying meaning is to what somebody is saying? Because communication is a lot deeper than the mere words that we speak. Sometimes it's what's unsaid that carries the most meaning of all. All right, thank you for listening today. I appreciate your attention. I hope that you have some questions to bring up during class time. And until I see you next time, cheers.